Hello, welcome or welcome back to Sapling Tarot and to another episode of The Cards Were Dealt, a series of discussions around tarot and neurodivergence. My guest today is Geneva from Real Nature Magic, and I will let them introduce themselves.
So would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Geneva. I'm of Real Nature Magic. I'm a professional animal communicator and nature communicator, as well as a tarot card reader, card slinger, and astrologer. I wear many hats, and I'm also an herbalist and an artist and an environmentalist, and all of my modalities tend to support each other. I like to say that my magic is an ecology itself, a diverse range of skills that kind of set each other up. All of it is informed by the fact that I'm a multiply disabled, non-binary person. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm neurodiverse.
That's great. I love that idea of being and kind of ecology. And I think I've always used the word constellation, but I think ecology works even better because it is that supporting. It's not the disparate things, they are connected and kind of interwoven and stuff. That's a really beautiful image. I really love that. So within that, how do you identify in terms of your neurodivergence?
So I am autistic as well as ADHD or AHD. I'm also very PDA, which is known as pathological demand avoidance. I don't like that. I heard another awesome tarot author, Lane Smith, changed PDA to like a potent drive for autonomy. And I love that mindset. That informs literally everything that I do, all my beliefs. I believe in all forms of autonomy for all beings, living and non-living. I also identify as a plurality or a constellation myself. I love constellation too because of like Mary K. Greer and the constellation tarot work. It's amazing stuff.
So for you, which came first, tarot or your knowledge of your neurodivergence?
So it's actually interesting. I think divination generally came with my diagnosis. I actually started my first card deck that I did readings with was actually a Magic the Gathering deck that I had built personally myself. So I could put like different cards instead of just like the same card and things that all kind of appeal to me. And it was also a deck that I was using on a daily basis to play Magic card games with people. So I had all of that experience to use as a context for, the readings. And then I got deeper into tarot in about 2018. It was like tarot and astrology also kind of came in. I had been introduced to them prior, but it was really through processing a traumatic event that had happened in my life that really brought me into tarot and astrology, for which I'm really grateful. It's been pretty amazing.
Cool. And so the neurodivergence bit, did that kind of come in the middle? Is it like a tarot sandwich with figuring out your neurodivergence in the middle?
Yeah, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, even the trauma what trauma is not related to being neurodiverse. We definitely experience a higher rate of trauma than a lot of other folks really understand. So in that way, I guess it was really like this in a lot of ways too. And I also really love about tarot that even when we're in those overwhelming experiences that often we can have challenges processing, that it's still a really solid support, like sometimes it's too much to dive into astrology for me. I love astrology and usually like rabbit hole, but if you're really going through something and you just can't really comprehend or get the cohesive feel about it, it's so easy sometimes to just like pick a card and find strength and encouragement in the cards and the symbolism and how every single card is a whole tapestry of symbolism. There's always so much. I'm going to share that one of my disabilities is actually Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder, and I think it's also comorbid with autism a lot. But what I think is fascinating about it is that as my style of neurodiversity really enjoys finding connections in between things. Even though I have a connective tissue disorder, I'm always looking for the connections, and that's also why I'm a multimodality practitioner, because I can see all the connections between all these different worlds.
Oh, that's delightful. Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't put those two things together before, of the connective tissue and the brain that seeks connection. But it makes perfect sense. That's very pleasing. But yeah, it's a very kind of normal and I suppose kind of common comorbidity with for autistic folk. And I mean, there's so many weird and wonderful things that link it, and not so wonderful things that link in with it. But it's I like that kind of linked by the connections and the seeing the connections and the patterns and everything.
That's why we're into the constellations in the first place as human beings, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And anything that tries to limit us or restrict us into being just one thing is really missing so much. So how did you come to figure out your neurodivergent?
That was actually really interesting. I struggled even from being a child. I've always been like super tactile, and so I had really, really high anxiety when I was a little child. And I had something called like trichotillomania, which is like you literally end up like pulling out your hair with tactile sensations. But it wasn't until my early 20s where we actually put it together that I was autistic. My sister was actually taking care of one of our nephews who had an autistic diagnosis. But it just kind of, when I found out, it was a gift for me to know, just because everything that I've experienced in my life was very othering. It was like, why am I here? This doesn't make sense. Like, my interactions with people don't make sense. Like, where's my, and that's always kind of where my locus has been nature. And I always got along with animals. So that was where I stepped into. And for me, I also had like an autistic teacher. Yeah, but it was not a good situation. That situation, which actually leads into the trauma that got me into tarot in the first place. It's really interesting how like connected this is. I didn't even think about that prior either. But yeah.
No, I think that's so often the way for people, is that it's a child, often a little boy, and then there's like kind of a ripple effect that goes all the way back through your family of just kind of like, oh, but someone goes, oh, but that's normal because uncle such and blah and granddad blah did the same thing, and that's just normal in this family. And you go, yes,
because
yeah, because these things are hereditary.
How much context you get on like the rest of the family too. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to interject that my sister just had a daughter, and it's just been so amazing. She loves me. Like, we're like so close. Even though we haven't spent a lot of time together, we're like this. And she talks about me all the time, even though I don't get to see her very often. And she's so neurodivergent. So just like being able to connect over that and understand that, and even for my sister to have context and of knowing me and knowing maybe a little bit more about, their experience. It's such a gift. It really is. The value of perspective cannot be undermined.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to live in a time where we have just a little bit more vocabulary to be able to share these experiences, and particularly for children and young people to be able to go like, no, I actually do know what you mean, and I actually do understand what you're going through. And as much as when they get a bit older and teenagers, that it will feel like we're just dinosaurs and we couldn't possibly understand, but to have just a little bit more shared vocabulary to be able to talk about like, you're actually like, it's not as weird as you think it is. There's a whole beautiful world of people sharing this experience with you, and while your exact thing is unique, you are part of this huge community of incredible people doing all sorts of incredible stuff. And to be able to share that is, at no other point in history have we been able to have these kinds of conversations across generations. We've always been here.
Always.
Wow.
And that's also, I think, what contributes to this like idea, this totally misled, misinformed idea that we're some kind of epidemic, or like how people are talking about that. No. Like, hell to the no, ever. Like, just because we are learning about ourselves and we're able to have conversations and we're able to actually learn more and be aware of our own biological instincts and going ons. Like, that's a beautiful thing. That's not a bad thing. And autistic people are not a bad thing and will never be a bad thing. Diversity is so important, like now more than ever before.
Yeah. Christ, yeah, that's just really hit home for me. For me, this is fun. This is the stuff I love talking about. You know, autism has been a special interest since before I got diagnosed. I love this shit. Love tarot is all my favourite. It's just dawned on me how genuinely important this is, that we're having these conversations and being, I mean, essentially out. Like, it feels like the Venn diagram of like the neurodivergent, disabled and queer experience of being visible. And I know that visibility comes with threat and that visibility and representation doesn't solve a lot of stuff, but it's still real important. And that's just dawned on me. So excuse me while I just have a bit of a kind of like, fuck. Yeah, that's... Yeah, it kind of, yeah. And it's just like, I live in a bit of a bubble, I guess. Like, I think almost all of my friends are autistic or neurodivergent, but most of them are autistic. And I think like where the UK is not great on autism, and it's certainly not great on ADHD, and you know, that's not to say that neurodivergence is just autism and ADHD, but just in this particular instance, we have a lot of press about ADHD being like overdiagnosed and all of that kind of bollocks. But like, in terms of the stuff that's been happening in the news, because we are recording this on Monday, the 1st of April, and autism is in the news right now.
Way.
A really, really big way. And so yeah, that's just blown my mind a little bit of just like how necessary it is to be having these conversations publicly and humanizing ourselves.
Exactly.
We're just people. Like,
just allowing us to feel like we can be ourselves is literally a life-shattering occurrence for people who have neurodivergent experience. We are literally expected to mask and pretend like we're something else for our entire lives. And yet people are not willing to have the slightest bit of patience with us or, you know, put the slightest bit of effort into possibly understanding where we're coming from, because it all comes from somewhere. It's very valid where it comes from. People they just generally, in my experience, don't care that much. And it's really alienating and isolating, which is why it's so important that we have autistic and neurodivergent friends. I'm the same way. I'm like, if we're hitting it off and we're gonna be really good friends, more than likely you're autistic.
Yeah, peer review, whether you have a diagnosis or not, peer review says yes. If I like you, then there's probably something going on. But yeah, and it's just the deeply frustrating irony that we are often called the rigid thinkers. And then you see like society at large being like, oh, but you have to human in this very, very narrow way that doesn't serve anyone really. And then it's yeah, but we're the narrow thinkers, we're the rigid thinkers. You just go,
because it's the ability to think in different ways, the ability to be embodied in different ways. Those are your possibilities for the future. Those are your options. When you decrease your diversity, just like in biology, then you don't have a lot of gene pool to draw from to adapt into things. So it's like literally like it benefits.
But it gets real messy, and that's eugenics.
And then we're there because, yeah, unfortunately, that's tied into the autistic experience. It's like a lived thing that we experience every single day of our lives as being tied to eugenics, let alone like naming one of our disorders after literally a Nazi. Like, no, thank you.
Yeah, that's on my medical record right there. And I'm like,
Right.
No, thank you. I'm autistic. That's I identify as, if we're gonna it's like, I'm autistic. Fuck you, and you're trying to separate me from not one of those autistics. I am one of those autistics.
Totally.
it's just like with all the stuff in the news about like all of this stuff, and then people being like, oh, but autistic people do work and they do pay taxes and they do date, and I'm like, I don't do any of those things. So I'm also a valuable, cool and sexy member of society. Thank you very much.
And that's not talked about a lot, even in the autistic community, like how much diversity within neurodiversity, within neuroemergence there is. There's so many. And it's really about understanding that all of us bring our own unique special gifts that somebody else isn't going to be able to bring for that moment. We're all specifically created to address something that's, it comes from somewhere. Absolutely.
And there's so much similarity in like the queer experience, I think, as well, of people who are like less able and or willing to assimilate to norms are thrown under the bus by people that can and want to. So it's like the autistics that are just like, well, I have a job and I am married and have my 2.2 kids and I have, and it's just those autistics that, are the bad ones. And, it's like the gays that are just like, I'm not one of those blue-haired non-binaries or whatever. And it's just like, okay, have a cookie.
Yeah, right.
They're going to come for you too.
Exactly. That's what's so...
doesn't do anyone any favors.
No, that's what's so sad about all of the ableism and like the uptick in ableism that's just been taking off, is that no matter who you are, it is advantageous to care about the disabled community, because it literally, like, something happens in 30 seconds and then you're part of the disabled community, or you happen to have like a family member that's born into the disabled community. At one point in our lives, it happens just about every single one of us. So it's
absolutely. If you're not disabled, the only difference between you and us is luck and time, as Imani Crutches and Spice talks about. And it may sound blunt, but it's true. You're either going to end up disabled or dead, and definitely dead at some point. But being disabled is what you should hope for, because otherwise it's just curtains. You should be so lucky as to be disabled.
And that ties right back into what we were talking about like having our own unique capabilities and our own strengths. And disabled people and autistic people especially, like, we're pressed right up against that structure of capitalism that we're like totally expected to adhere to, and like cis hetero patriarchy really correlate my understanding of being queer with my autistic identity. It was actually understanding my autistic identity that really led me to understanding that I also identify as queer in a couple different ways. So it's definitely true.
Yeah, I'm similar. I remember the first time I heard the word autigender, and I assumed wrongly that it was people, because of the way that disabled people broadly are kind of de-sex and stuff. I was just like, oh, is this just another way of like turning us into kind of like Barbie and Ken dolls, totally smooth and like and then it was just like, oh no, it's to do with like the social construct of gender and not really being able to connect with that. And I was like, oh wait, no, that's me. That's hi. I'm in this picture. Whoops. Yeah. No, I don't get it at all. I have no concept of what everyone's talking about in every part of my life. And like you, I'm a Gemini. And so it's like non-binary, pansexual, like all of these things. Like, I refuse to pick a side.
Yep, exactly.
Why be one thing when you can be many things?
The whole spectrum.
Exactly. Either, neither, and both. I feel you on them being all, well, it's like you said at the beginning about the kind of the ecology of ours, is that they're all part of the same thing. And it's, what a time to be alive. And the butting right up against capitalism. And I've talked about this before, but my route to what has essentially become my spirituality, but is also my politics and is also my everything else, I think much like you, came through the need for me to deal with the fact that I was disabled. Yeah. And so having to find my own self-worth outside of capitalism and productivity, hustle, whatever. And so it was just like, okay, well, how do I see myself as having innate worth? I think of myself the way that I think of a tree, or the way that I think of things that just are. And then that has informed everything from there on out. And it was kind of like coming home to that sort of the way things made sense when I was a child before people taught me about capitalism and productivity and what makes you worthwhile.
Absolutely.
And I think that we have a similar experience with that.
Hugely. In fact, I really, really relate to that. That resonates hugely with me because I'm sure you've also experienced this where people will call you too sensitive or, that you're too much or whatever they
But
do.
also not enough and not tuned in enough. So too sensitive, not sensitive enough, too much, not enough.
Right?
All at the same time.
All at the same time. I was very similar. The cards and communicating with animals and astrology for me really changed that. It was my key to subverting that story and understanding that our sensitivity can also be our strength. And it's also like a superpower, if you can wield it. And it's also challenging. I also have a medical condition, mast cell activation syndrome, that's also comorbid with Ehlers-Danlos and autism. And it's in the fascia, which is why it commingles with the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and it means that I have anaphylactic reactions to just about everything. So I can barely go out in the world without having an anaphylactic reaction. So I'm so sensitive that I can literally pick up on any kind of fragrance or any kind of cleaning solvent that anybody has used. My partner will walk in the door and I know exactly what the last thing he ate was.
Wow.
So
but with the autistic sensory thing as well, that is just a perfect circle, isn't it, of just all of that together.
Exactly. And the tactical stuff was also something that brought me back to cards too, because when I was pulling my hair out, what do you do with your hands? So much anxiety in your hands. My grandma was a cribbage player. We played crib, so we always would I'd be trying to cut the cards and get a 7 so I can get more points. And I actually was oh shit, whoa. And just being able to have cards in my hands and just feeling the cards and just putting all of your awareness that you're in your tactile sensations, for me it just is so helpful in so many ways.
Yeah. It's such a good point. And I think that for a lot of people in the tarot community, that is part of how they kind of maintain a practice, is because they use cards as essentially stim objects or fidget objects and stuff. And it's because I'm also a hair puller and a skin picker, which is super sexy and fun. Love it. It helps me focus. It's not nice, but it helps me think. But it calms me down. But yeah, I'm here with a fucking crystal in my hands, being yeah, this is why we're drawn to all of this stuff, because it comes with accessories. And we can just fiddle with it. And there's a collecting magpie thing, and there's so many, and it's then it interacts with the consumerism thing, and so then if we try and deal with that, then it's just but it helps. It helps manage all of this.
Yeah, I definitely have a large of tarot decks.
You said about the game Marseille and the kind of the chemical smell of the deck, and as much as that is really rubbish, and I feel the same way about cards, I have my Terra Volatile that I wanted to work with this month, but it's been away in its box, and so I've just had to leave it airing out because I can't go anywhere near it because I'm a migraine-y person.
Yes, me too. So sorry.
But I'm just I'm grateful for people that notice the smells of things. On TarotTube, anyone that ever mentions what a deck smells like, I'm you're my people. You can smell that too. Excellent. Well, sorry, but also excellent.
No, absolutely. It's such a gaslit experience. People, even doctors will be there is absolutely no way that you are that. I will walk in front of you, my face will literally start swelling up. It is literally that fast. It is literally like that. I also get migraines too. I'm so sorry that you have to deal with them. They're so awful. I really dislike migraines. But it's true. It's how do we find knowledge? It's the Hierophant. The Hierophant for me was such a hard card because I was what the hell is this? I never really related to humanity and civilization and the human kind of ideology. So because I always have challenges interacting with them. So when I tried translating that into my experience with the tarot, I was like, what does this card mean? And then after spending time with it, that actually became the meaning of the Hierophant for me. It was that, trust your knowledge, trust yourself on this, like you're the Hierophant. So it's really just being able to build that solid framework for like respecting your own perspective, especially as people who are literally gaslit out of it on a daily basis. It's really interesting how these occult arts like astrology and tarot can really humanize those aspects of us and really give us a framework for appreciating those parts of us that other people might not even be able to see, be privy to. Because there's so much bias in our culture that so much of that stuff is just not on people's radar at all, even though it should be, if you ask me. I'm really grateful, personally.
I think that's such a hard card for so many people, because of what it represents, like in terms of where certainly the society that I live in has gone over the 100+ years since the Smith weight was drawn up. Like, opinions about the Pope have changed significantly in terms of how people feel about organized religion and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's something that brings up a lot of friction for a lot of people and trauma for a lot of people. Like, I grew up in Ireland, and I mean, it's just, there's a lot of religious trauma kicking about. And so I think that's a really beautiful way to come at it. So how do you distinguish between the Hierophant and the High Priestess then, if you're talking about that like inner knowing coming from the Hierophant?
So I see High Priestess as more of like an acknowledgement of the whole invisible realm. So like the realm of like emotions, even I'm an animal communicator, so people don't often think of like telepathic communication in that realm, but we are all communicators. We're all doing communication all the time, and we're just not aware of it. So it's like becoming aware of those realms. That's how I feel the High Priestess really like presents themselves to you. And the Hierophant, also being correlated with Taurus, is also like this like stubborn inner knowing where like even if it's not what everybody is going to tell you on the outside, and it is based in the knowledge that you have gained from working with High Priestess, that you're using that to honor yourself, and you're taking that as like the authority. It's like your own, it's not quite like an authority like the emperor, but it's like a philosophical kind of authority. That
it's almost like a confidence kind of thing.
Yes.
Like a trust and a confidence in yourself. Because I have the deck that I use for client readings, the Hierophant carries a lot of like, it's that sort of ancestral wisdom. And so again, it's that very rooted kind of Taurus, like it's sort of that like stretch of like all the way back, but it's very like in the body. And so, but like in that kind of like tangible, physical, earthy body rather than the kind of more like watery fluid body of the High Priestess. So yeah, I love that distinction. That's very cool.
For me, it also lines up with like Taurus being nature and like the expression of nature, like Earth's actual expressions of beauty. And for me, nature is what defines my philosophy, and it defines my religion, and it defines like how I see the world and how I strive to approach it and better myself so that I can have better interactions with nature and better interactions with the world. And I really feel like in doing so, you really learn how valuable diversity actually is, and you understand why exactly it's so important. And I believe that the reason I do what I do is if we started believing in the autonomy of nature and our animals and these amazing beings started talking to nature like they are the beings that they are, then we may have some compassion and understanding for their position in the whole scheme of things.
Yeah, absolutely. While you were talking, I was thinking about how fully on board and like kind of with you I am. And then just there was like this kind of flicker of remembering that is technically woo to a lot of people, and how baffling that is to me. Why do you not just, how can you not feel that to me, that just feels so true and so kind of obvious and not at all kind of woo or spooky or whatever. Like it's just, it is how it is to me and to you. Yeah, absolutely. And I do feel sad people sometimes that they feel so detached from all of it.
Absolutely.
And I know that makes some things easier, but also like I wouldn't go back to being totally shut off from all of it, because that wasn't, I think for me that was very much like what was kind of pushed on me, and like so that would never really have lasted. But yeah, it's so lovely, and I agree so fully.
It's like we had to detach in order to comply with capitalism, because capitalism places all value on like profit and money versus, like our natural resources. My perspective is that literally being humans in some regard, anyways, half human, but we have opposable thumbs. And it is my belief that we have literally come to have opposable thumbs so that we can interact with nature, right? And like propagate the legacy of nature, because it's nature's our mother. Like we are nature's children. We are the children of the earth. So it only makes sense that we'd want to take care of our mother, right? And it's like
some people have some pretty tricky relationships with their mothers, but yeah.
Me, so I definitely for sure.
But I'm just being silly. But yeah, no, I'm with you, and I think that's such a sweet idea about thumbs. And I don't know. I can't think about opposable thumbs. We had this milk advert in the UK that was called the Cravendale Cats, and it was about what would happen if cats had opposable thumbs. And it was just this ad campaign, and I remember talking to people about it, and they didn't remember it, and I was like, oh my god, did I imagine this thing about these cats with opposable thumbs? And this was like, it's probably more than 15 years ago, and so we're not talking good visual graphics and stuff. They were sinister as fuck, but it was but like I still remember, and every time I see that brand of milk in the supermarket, I'm just like, Cravendale cats with opposable thumbs, cats take over the world because they want the milk. Want the milk? Yeah, we have cats with opposable thumbs trying to steal the milk. That's it. But yeah, no, that's lovely. Interacting with nature and opening milk bottles.
Right.
That's what opposable thumbs are for.
Exactly. And it's like when we turned our back on nature, that's when we turned our back on ourselves. That's like turning our back on our own divinity and birthright. And it's not until that we can remember that humans are going to be able to go along this a little bit more peacefully or united or harmoniously. And I could never understate the efficacy and importance, the sheer vitality that these arts, tarot and herbalism and telepathic communication, astrology, all really lend to that. They really lend to, especially as somebody, like, I was definitely told that I was sick like my whole life, and they didn't mean like my disability is sick either. And that is just not true. It's not simply true. And it's been so hard for me personally to try and reclaim that from the whole world, right? They're like, oh, well, you're the common factor, then it's gotta be, no. Systemic oppression is a fucking thing that's very real. And these modalities I would not have been able to be where I am now. I would not have been able to be me if I had not found access to these and had engagement with nature.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And these, like you were saying about the Hierophant and the things that bolster that like inner confidence and that inner knowing and the trust in yourself when so much of the outside world is telling you to not trust what your body is telling you and what your kind of inner knowing is telling you. And so like all of these, that's, no matter kind of where you stand on the tarot belief continuum, using it as a tool, working with it as a tool to get to know yourself better and to dig deep into that kind of inner knowing is a fairly universal part of it as a craft, a tool, activity, whatever. Like it's, I think, yeah, that, and astrology and all of these things of that, like coming back to yourself and learning how to trust and giving you whatever it is that you need in order to be able to trust that.
Exactly. That's what I center my practice on. That I strive to be trauma informed and use the tarot and astrology as a framework for liberation and validation, emotional and personal validation of what you've been experiencing, because my experiences have been so often tried to be like ripped away from me, or like redesigned, or like squashed together with another one to make it look like a different thing. Or so that's really what defines my whole praxis.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel, yeah, I think we share a lot of kind of common goals, even down to the phrasing of striving to be trauma informed rather than just being like trauma informed. And I'm just like, I see you saying the thing and being like there's only, we are still humans and there's only so much we can do. It's like talking about every time I see somewhere saying that they're a safe space, and I'm just like, for who? You're trying to be safer, yes, absolutely, but safe, or it's like fully accessible. No one can be fully accessible. People have conflicting access needs. So
Yep.
be specific.
And that's also,
is there a ramp? Is that what you mean? You mean there's a ramp? That's all you mean?
that's also something we can see in nature too. If you of like understanding that like harm is something that is literally a part of life. You don't have life without harm to some extent. And harm reduction because of this is extremely important. But you know, being able to think that we can reduce ourselves to having absolutely no harm whatsoever is not realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, just kind of going, you know, walking around my little garden or something, I will have probably killed a number of small creatures just by the nature of stepping on things.
Yeah, exactly.
Existing in the world is, and you know, it's like when people talk about magic and about like what is like baneful magic, and it's like, well, if you do a prosperity working for you to get a job, then someone else doesn't get that job, and so therefore you've done them harm. So
Painful working, yeah.
yeah, like, so it's all, yeah, it's a very measured and realistic view, I think, and yet alarmingly uncommon to be viewing things from that, yeah, like kind of harm reduction.
And just being, I think just being neurodiverse really helps that understanding, because as, you know, someone who has studied a lot and become really aware of like neurodiversity culture, you understand that everyone is different. Everyone has different trauma triggers. Everybody has specific experiences that will lead to different outcomes. And like, yeah, because that's actually one of the reasons that I love astrology so much, is that it really is ingratiating. It really validates that we're supposed to have a bunch of different people. We're not all supposed to fit in one category. We're all going to have different feelings, different places of coming from, different, and that feels more whole to me than the reductive, like type A personality, funnel you into this for capitalism so that you can go and make money. And I'm just like, no, bro, like we have different things to offer. We have to be open to understanding that.
Do you think that your neurodivergence impacts your experience of your intuition?
Yeah, I do actually. Very much so. I think, I don't know, it's just this way of like knowing, or I know like with animal communication specifically and nature communication, it's something that can happen through such a like a large spectrum of manifestations, different ways of like hearing and different ways of experiencing. And I think those ways of experiencing are always unique to us on the spectrum also. So for me, I think, well, it's also so much of it is also linked to just my philosophy, my core beliefs, and how I feel like a better, less harmful world would look like, and the steps we might be able to take to go there. So I think also in terms of just like the questions that I'm able to ask, it's like especially tarot, which is such a the question based kind of a modality. Astrology is the same way. I feel like if you're doing it right, I feel like a lot of people tend to project like, you're like this, you're like this, you're like this, instead of asking. And so I really love about tarot that the asking is kind of built into it. You know, you're asking for different perspectives, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. I also believe that I literally can throw my deck up in the air and it'll land on the floor, and what I see is going to be the cards that I need to see. So it's just that self-acceptance. So I think it's been harder for me to accept intuition because of those like gaslighting spots. I also have challenges with like the word psychic. There's like so much fetishization of like autism specifically with like, oh, like autists are, telepathic or like
Imagine.
like I don't know. The way my animal communication teacher teaches it is that all humans have that capability, that it's not something that's specific to like a certain subset, but it's true. It's like learning a language. It's like some people have an easier time learning a language than others, but that's not to say that other people can't learn that language, like I think that's very important. And I wish that we could acknowledge that a little bit more as like humans, that this is kind of a built-in thing. And I feel like that would stop that kind of fetishization of neurodiverse people around like telepathy. It's a challenging corner for me because I am doing that work. That is work that I'm doing. But at the same time, part of the population that's being kind of ensconced within it in a harmful way.
I think as it gets tied in with like A, autism is a superpower, B, starseeds, C, people who identify as HSP, highly sensitive people, and kind of the interaction with that and autism as a thing, I think is really interesting. I also think that we have a funny thing. I always worry that I stray too far into making generalizations about, I suppose, culture broadly, when what I mean is the culture that I've grown up in. But I think where the fetishization of people with like natural talent is huge and put on a pedestal above people who've worked for something. And yet there's supposed to be this whole thing about like how hard work is good. It's that like a whole like Protestant work ethic, trickle down bullshit thing. But it's like, but then there's this other secret thing, which is, but actually, if you're working hard, you're stupid because you should either be naturally good at it or you should be exploiting somebody else to do the thing. And I think that the thing about like, it's only really good if you're like naturally good at it is so weird and kind of used to, yeah, like as a way to jab people that, there's a lot happening in there, I think.
That's it's really like why Saturn is considered a malefic in our culture. Like if you are spending all of your life trying to avoid accountability, of course Saturn's going to be a malefic, but if we just changed it a little bit, then it's really it goes back to that perspective thing again. Like we're not so aware about our own biases as a culture or even as an individual, and without knowing, that's also things that I feel like fall in the realm of like the high priestess, like all these invisible assumptions and all these invisible things that are tied to people's actions and are tied to people's identities, but that they may not even be aware of.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's something that tarot gets kind of lauded as this incredible kind of tool for what gets called like shadow work and working with the bits of ourselves that we don't know and that we don't want to look at and that maybe are completely obscured from view. And I just think that that's like, it's not a given. I think some people, because that's how they use tarot, they assume that that's what everyone is doing and that everyone is getting into the real nitty gritty. But again, that can be a lot of things. Like you can be in therapy for, decades and not actually touch the fact that, you hold some deeply horrific, racist, xenophobic, whatever views or whatever. That just doesn't come up because you're talking about your relationship with your mother or whatever. Like, we are full of so much stuff. It takes a lot of concerted effort to pick apart those really challenging, particularly if they're deep and hidden. And so, stuff about those like cultural beliefs that people take on as truth when they are just kind of opinions. So things like Saturn and ideas around discipline. And because most people, I think, probably have baggage around that as a word, despite it being kind of a neutral thing, but most of us have some terrible experiences with it.
Yeah.
And things around work and
also gender.
Yeah. big time.
So all these assumptions, it's really interesting. I know there's, I'm not sure, have you ever heard of Donald Hoffman? He's like a physicist that is working on like cognitive science of reality. And basically what his framework is that what we're experiencing is not actually reality, but our brains have evolved to see factors in a framework of like survival of the fittest, or like these survival mechanisms are actually imprinted on our brains so that that is how we and organized into a reality that motivates us to go achieve those fronts. And when you think about that, that's like that was kind of huge for me. It was like, oh, wow, it's not actually real. And it goes back to like astronomy and astrology too. And again, those patterns that we're finding in the stars. I've been learning my astronomy finally after like being into astrology for a long time. And it's just been so magical and just like empowering to see the planets and see the stars and, you know, just understand that the world that we do live in, whether we understand it or not, is this giant magical realm. It's like a giant cauldron where like so many things can happen and we don't even know. Or even just like waking up, because I've loved stargazing so frequently. When I wake up, I'm like, I want to go stargaze, but it's the light, so you can't. But just understanding that that's all still there. It actually inspired me to want to start a book on this topic of like the solar sect and the lunar sect, and how the solar sect kind of tramples out the lunar sect in our culture, because we are also like a solar culture that, you know, we're diurnal, our entire patterns, circadian rhythms are all circled around heliocentric philosophy. But if we were to integrate more of the hidden invisible realms, that's also like understanding of the fact that death is part of the experience and part of like even things like fires, for example. I'm a fire survivor of a 2022 fire here in so-called New Mexico in the United States. And it's really interesting because it was a really bad fire simply because we as humans have been trying to repress fire as energy, right? Because we have people that are living in there, and so we want to protect their houses, which makes sense. But we also have to realize that like fire is also a part of nature, and fire has a niche in nature. There are often plants like lodgepole pines, their cones won't even open until a fire goes through. So they won't even have seeds available until a fire goes through. Even things like carnivores or like wolves. I know here in the United States, we've had a lot of issues just with farmers that basically like eradicated the wolf populations because they were going after like sheep or livestock. And so now we're left with a lot of grazers that have no niche to keep them in control. So that has kind of been over expanding. And it's literally like we just have these imbalances in our understanding of what reality actually is, because we're picking and choosing what we want to engage with instead of seeing it as a whole. Or like mushrooms, like it's another thing. A lot of people are totally terrified of mushrooms, or like, I think they're so fascinating and like this really cool beings from like space that came on a meteorite. Like, are you kidding? So cool. But because they are part of the decay cycle and part of that breakdown of essential elements in like rotting logs and freeing up those elements so that they can be used with other plants. That's what fire does too. You know, it's like just our understanding of these cycles have been so limited from our experiences that we're now projecting that into the void instead of actually, you know, experiencing what the void is.
Well, we're scared of the void, aren't we? I think like kind of culturally, we had the same with reintroducing wolves in Scotland because the deer population just decimated loads of forests because obviously.
Right?
Like, obviously. And it's, so there was all of this stuff where they pulled out all of the native pine trees and planted Norwegian pine, because Norwegian pine grows straighter, but like you get bigger planks and fucking, And then, so all of this like non-native forest that just covers Scotland And then, yeah, and then the deer were eating it, and then they had to bring in wolves, and you just go like, how long are we going to be fixing the mistakes of...
Gosh.
I mean, my ancestors, my specific, as a white British person, like my ancestors went all over everywhere and just fucked shit up. And how long are we going to be trying to solve these problems that needn't have been?
That they picked that tree so because it's straighter is like such an emulation of like the cis hetero, like really?
It writes itself, doesn't it? Yeah, it's bigger and straighter.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's so true about the mushrooms and the fire and stuff, and that we're so, yeah, there's so much against like decay. And I mean, yeah, with like British society in general with grief and death, like we just don't touch it really. It's like it doesn't
Actually physically embalm these bodies with like these toxic chemicals just so we won't even see the slightest bit of decay. It's literally like we are throwing these wrenches in the cycles of nature, who was like, we could just decompose them, turn them into dirt, and it's does the whole thing. It's like made to do the whole thing, right? But we do everything we can to stymie that particularly. We do the embalming process and then stick you in a box just for good measure.
yeah.
I actually just there's somewhere here in New Mexico that does like a human composting funeral thing that I was like, whoa, that's like next level shit right there. So I was super interested in that.
Yeah, I think we have a few around here, like certainly in terms of the like, well, they have to call them all sorts of like strange and euphemistic phrases though, so it's kind of hard to work out what they are. But I think there's a few of those around here, and certainly in terms of the like, and we plant a tree, you're just like, and what's the tree growing in?
Right.
And that's fine, but like, you just feel like they can't say it straight out. They have to use kind of flowery language and stuff. But yeah, it's so interesting about the idea of it being like so much of stuff being almost in direct opposition with actual reality. And I think about like all of the stuff that's happening with trans rights here in the UK at the moment that's just been
Heartbreaking.
up, and just how, yeah, all of this stuff is in direct opposition with actual reality. And all of the history of like the gender binary going back really not that far, and just all of these things. I mean, then you can think about like the idea of like the social construct of race and all of these hierarchies that have been implemented in like not even that long, and it's, but people take them as immutable facts now. You're just like, what are we doing?
That's so true. And that also goes back to like autistic people in like a really, really big way, because we don't even get the say in our identities. We're not the experts in our own identities. You know, non-autistic professionals or autism parents, no, that's not how it goes. So it's really just like we're trained to take all of this for granted, especially about ourselves. We're told to think this about ourselves and this about ourselves and this about ourselves.
Autistic people are like, you're like, really interesting.
Interesting. You don't say.
I think that is slowly changing. I think there are more and more autistic people, but then again, it's that thing about there's on Threads, which I can't believe I still use, but I do because of this one account, and they're called Black Spectrum Scholar, and they talk a lot about like sort of white low support needs people being the loudest voices in the autistic community. And I do think that is probably, so it's going to be like, we might swap some non-autistics for autistics, but then also we need to be careful about who we're swapping that out and making sure that we have a slightly more representative sample of the community on the whole, and how do we go about doing that. But again, that has to happen within the community, not being done by non-autistic people.
Right.
In Baron Cohen. Get the spin. But yeah, But I suppose that does happen for a lot of different marginalised groups, is that it's people from outside and from whatever dominant group are the people that decide what is good for the marginalized group. You think about, I don't know, the history of women and, like, you know, votes for women. You can't give them votes. It will frazzle their sorry little brains. And, you know, all of the terrible things that have been said about all different, well, I mean, you see it in, yeah, all sorts of different things around the world where people that are not the most impacted are the people that are making decisions.
And if we valued autonomy, then we would be asking those people, because that's what we would value. I just know that being autonomous and having that, even with the animals, that's my whole with animal communication is simply like giving them some autonomy in the situation, you know, and be able to have an actual voice and be able to actually like defend yourself or say what you want to say or be like, hell no, or, you know, just any number of responses that they can have with that too. It's so important. And I really wish that we were better listeners as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think it's such a cool thing that you do. I don't think I've come across anyone that does that before. And I was reading your website and I was just, it's amazing. Impossibly cool. And I just, like, I don't know, want to go on a walk with you around my neighborhood and be like, introduce you to all of my friends, like the birds and the stuff, and be like, hello, this is a person that can talk to you. I do my best. I try, but like, this is, you know, just let you meet all my friends. I don't know. I consider them my friends. I haven't checked with them. It's a Imogen. But like, yeah, I love them so much. Yeah, what would make the tarot, witchy, occult community feel more kind of welcoming or accessible for you in terms of neurodivergence and stuff?
Love to see people try to be more accommodating. For one, I see very few spaces, very few practitioners that even allow accommodations or scholarships for disabled people in general. And it's very difficult when you are already living a life where you're expected to be somebody else, and you also live in a world that doesn't validate your struggles, you know? So I would love to see people just ask members of their community, you know, like I really love captions. Captions really helps me a lot. I also am so much better at typing, like some days. Usually if I have another neurodiverse person, I can like, oh yeah, we'll be fine. But if it's a neurotypical person, I'm like, I don't have fucking clue of what to say. So I'll just like type. I'll just be in the chat doing chat things. And sometimes I'll do like a whole class and I'll just chat. And just like, I really just like how the high functioning, low functioning garbage, like it's fucking garbage. In my personal experience as somebody that people have often considered as high functioning, all that serves to do is devalidate my struggles and basically make it so that nobody has empathy or like wants to help with the struggles that I have because I'm smart, right? So I should be able to do everything else. What? No, we're all different. We have unique facets. Just because we're one way doesn't mean, you know, just it goes back to that like sun and moon and, you know, the high priestess of just understanding that what's on the outside is not what's on the inside, and that you actually have no way of knowing what's on the inside unless you actually honor their autonomy and fucking ask them.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that people have kind of shifted a bit more towards talking about high support needs and low support needs, and I understand what they're driving at. And I came across for the first time fairly recently the idea of there being levels of autism, which I find funny. I understand what they mean again, but I like the idea of being like kind of, hi, yeah, I'm a level 5 autism. I've worked really hard at this. I've been, you know, put a lot of time and effort into this, and you know, I'm leveling it up. But like and I understand why people want there to be distinctions between, you know, people who are, you know, non-speaking and people who would struggle to live independently. But like my argument, and I know that people would argue with me about this, is that humans in general have support needs. Some are better accommodated than others, and most people don't live alone, like don't live like entirely independently with no other help. And it's just like, you know, the whole, because I'm the same. People consider me high functioning because of the way that I present myself and the way I've come across. And I'm like, lol, what the fuck?
But we're fucking awesome, even still.
We're super fun and, have lots to contribute, but also even if we didn't, that wouldn't matter because we inherently have value as humans.
Exactly.
But it's like, the whole functioning thing, it's so, like you say, it's so face value, it's so snapshot, and just like, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to be high functioning? And I know that, again, because you've got like people just wanting to make distinctions for kind of good reasons. And then there's some people who are trying to be like, not like one of those autistics. And like we were saying before, absolutely one of those autistics, 100%. Don't lump me out of a category.
It's like using capitalism to define your value is what it is. It's like, well, you guys should have a better time at being able to live in capitalism and make money. No, I can't. Like, me and capitalism have no fucking idea how. I'm just like, no, it doesn't. It just bounces off. Figuring out how to like brand yourself and do all the reductive bullshit you're supposed to do to like, oh my, it's so hard. It's so challenging. I have such an easier time promoting somebody else than I have promoting myself. It's like I am very disabled when it comes to capitalism. Like, but not because of me, because capitalism is awful and needs to be completely scrapped.
Yeah. It's such a bizarre metric for. I think sometimes because we've been having a lot of bullshit to do with like disability benefits going on over here, and it's to do with like, oh, there are just so many more people who are like disabled and on long-term sick now, and you just go, what, after a mass, well, not even after, during mass disabling events? No shit.
Yes.
And it's just like talking about all of these jobs that you like, how would you make that job accessible for you? And like all of these jobs that disabled people should go and get. And I'm just like, listen, my self-worth isn't as bad as it used to be, but who the fuck would hire me? Like, who on green earth? Like, who? Like, okay, I don't know my energy levels day to day. I can't deal with bright lights, strong smells, any sort of loud noises. I need really, really clear instructions, like all of these things. I'm just like, I'm hardly, I'm great, but I'm hardly a boon to most normal jobs. Like, I don't, with the best will in the world, I probably wouldn't hire me for most jobs. Like, I just,
but if we could...
I have to deal with my own shit. And I'm like, this is fun.
I feel the same way. I really relate. I definitely have never been able, because of my disabilities, like I get sick a lot. I often, back in the day, would go into shock for a whole week every single month. And so the only thing that I could actually do was stay in school, because you can't take a doctor's note in and be like, rehire me. I was sick. They're like, what the fuck ever? Like, you're still fired, right? But if you're in school, then they kind of have to be a little bit more lenient with you. So I just like stayed in school for as possibly long as I possibly could. But then, disability kicks in and you're like, okay, I can't do that anymore. So where am I going from there? Just tarot and astrology and animal communication and herbalism. It's all been something that I have come across in an effort to go, build healing and build compassion for myself and also for others along that same track. And I just wish that we could restructure things so that we could feel valued, because we are incredibly valuable. Even if, we can't show up very consistently or do all these other things that there are so much pressure placed on us, we also have really brilliant ideas that people would not think of without us, because we have a unique biology that really like proliferates these unique perspectives too. So if people were to value that, then maybe there wouldn't be so much like reliance on those solar principles, like showing up or being able to work from home. It breaks my heart that they're trying to undo the accessibility that we had during the pandemic, which is like ridiculous in the first place, because like, really, you guys, you able-bodied folks need a pandemic in order to give us fucking accommodations? Like, really?
Oh, the weird grief in the early days of the pandemic of the seemingly instant accommodations for things like gigs, things like video calls with the doctor that had never been a thing, and just like all of these things that just suddenly were available because, you know, pre-disabled people needed them. And the whiplash of, you must be shitting me. Like, and the education thing was big for me because I'd tried so many times. Like, I don't have any like technical formal qualifications past the age of 16 because I just kept hitting these walls. And the fact that it was just suddenly available, it was amazing, but it was the most bittersweet thing in the world.
Right.
And
Like, what the actual fuck?
restaurants suddenly doing takeaway, or that you could like go and pick up, and like all of this food and all of these things available, and then being like, can we hold it? Can we keep this? Is this a new era? Back to, because people have office space that they need to keep getting rent from for businesses, and I'll go back and work. Those were some weird years for like...
Because people cared. You know, there actually were people that cared about not getting you sick.
The people who used to talk to me about like kind of, oh, it must be so great not having to go to work and like being at home all day and kind of, oh, you must have so much free time. They were on furlough, going absolutely out of their minds. Moment, there was like a little bit of solidarity where they were just like, oh, this isn't fun. No, I actually am going mad. And I was just like, yeah. I've been like this for years. This is my life. You can do it for a couple of months.
You can't take it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, it's so true. It's so true. They have absolutely no idea what it's like, or just being sick. Like what it's like getting migraines, for example. Like, holy shit. Pain is a real thing. It has a real impact on your quality of life and your mental health. And when you're constantly in pain, like, and yet we're still expected to do all this other stuff. It's really, instead of just, you know, accepting humans for being human, which is going to be inherently flawed and in so many ways, it's so frustrating.
Fluid and flexible. And again, I suppose that is that kind of slightly kind of solar lunar thing of the wanting things to be, again, the irony is not lost on me, of wanting things to be kind of strict and rigid and dependable and stuff, rather than understanding the fluidity and the flexibility that is necessary for life. And if I can get that as an autistic person, it would be real nice if the people that have a go at me for being a rigid thinker could just take a little bit of it and, you know, be like, oh, actually humans are animals and we're not actually robots. Not yet, anyway. Like,
that's it. We just pretend like we're not part of nature anymore. We're just like somehow like greater than nature and now walk above nature and see all of the trees and plants as like purely environmental decor for us to, you know, appreciate. Like, no, these are like living beings, you know, these are beings that have been here like way before we have. They know so much, and we're just like, oh my gosh, like my teacher, she's amazing. I learned from Maya Kincaid, PhD of the Sedona Plant and Animal School for Communication. The reason that I love her so much is that she's been working to lift like there's so much gatekeeping in this realm too. And one of my favorite things that she said is that we don't actually need to try to be connected to nature. We don't need to like tune in. We don't need to dial in. We don't need to fast. We don't need to align our chakras. We're already part of nature. We are literally a part of nature. So it's like when we are sitting there trying to tune in, all we're really doing is elevating our own self, and like the plant or animal is just waiting for us to get over ourselves so we can actually have a conversation. You know, just like...
Yeah. I feel like there's a quote from someone about us being like nature experiencing itself, and that, yeah, the idea that we have to do something special to connect with nature as if we aren't nature.
And you look at all these trees and we're like, no, we're a more important part of nature than you. Like, what? No.
Baffling. Deeply baffling. Do you have any resources you recommend for neurodivergent tarot readers?
I do, actually. So my tarot teacher, Lindsay Mack of Tarot for the Wild Soul, is amazing. I love them so much, and they're probably one of the most inclusive teachers that I have had the privilege to work with. I really appreciate them so much and their teachings. I also, so that the author that I was talking about earlier with the protective of drive to autonomy, Lane Smith,
Yeah.
they wrote a really cool book called 78 Acts of Liberation, and it's basically like turning a tarot framework into an activist framework. And I know a lot of us neurodiverse folk are really into like social justice and making a difference in the world. So I feel like that would be a book that would be appreciated. What other resources? Yeah, I mean it's so different too because we each have our own style and we each have our own things that we're called to meet and everything. But I think having like an autistic community, a neurodiverse community particularly, is probably my number one recommendation, just so that you don't end up in those gaslit experiences feeling like you're not relevant and you actually feel like you have space that you can be yourself. I think that is very important to trusting yourself, which is like when you get a card and you're like, oh no, wrong one. Let's try another one.
Yeah. Or even because we can't totally protect ourselves from the kind of butting up against those more challenging experiences, but having people to kind of debrief with afterwards and being like, right, this happened. Am I wrong? I'm not wrong, am I? And people will be like, you're not wrong, they were a dick. Like that in itself. Like, I think about the amount of therapy I've had over the years. God forbid the amount of money I've spent on therapy over the years. But some of the most impactful moments have been when my therapists have, like, essentially broken character and said something like, what a dick. And, like, that was better than hours of really, like, you know, proper framework, whatever, of just someone going, like, fuck me, that's awful. This is healing.
Yes, it's so healing. It's so healing. That's one of the reasons that tarot for me was like so special, is because it is. It's like you just see that one card that really just resonates with what you're feeling and you are validated suddenly and you're not just alone thinking this thing and questioning this thing that you're thinking or feeling, and just having that support, because so many of us are just, we're isolated, and disabled people in general, we're like isolated in our own care environments, and it's really hard for us to believe like there are other people like us even, or
Yeah, I don't know where I would be without my disabled and neurodivergent community. Like, I mean, essentially that is like most of my community because, like we were saying before, if I like you, you might as well just get a diagnosis. Like, here you go. If I think you're all right, then, you know, here's your piece of paper. Peer review says, yeah, something's going on there. Well, I think that's all the questions. I think we covered loads of really, really great stuff. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your thoughts, and it's just been really cool to talk to you and to get to chat about this stuff. It's been really gorgeous.
it's my favorite thing too, so this was really fun for me.
And that is a wrap. Thank you so much to the wonderful Geneva for taking this time with me and going through all of these incredible meanders of topics. And thank you so much to you for listening. I hope you're taking really good care of yourself, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.